Hello, I'm Derek. Welcome to episode 4 of A Little Wine, A Little Time. A Little Wine, A Little Time is a pairing of wine and political discussion. Please check out episodes 1 and 2 for a little backstory about this podcast. In this episode, I'll be breaking down one of the darkest days in American history, January 6th, 2021, while enjoying one of the boldest styles of red wine, a delicious Zinfandel by the Federalist. January 6th is a hot topic in our political discourse and a very important one to understand. I'll discuss it and I will discuss the wine later in the episode. Please like and subscribe to the dliciousmedia YouTube channel. And if you find this podcast has some value to you, I'll have some different ways to support in the show notes. And of course, sharing would help greatly. Share it with others who may not understand the issue or those who try to downplay it or whitewash it. But first, I'm going to pour a little bit of wine. It's a lot of bit of wine. So, let's dive right in. January 6th. The coup attempt that many of us watched live on national TV. What a day. I saw it all coming. In the days leading up to that dark day, I was engaging in conversation with a woman who was deep into QAnon. I had many exchanges with her over the course of several months on a mutual friend's Facebook wall and on the wall of a local media personality. That mutual friend, a woman I've known since childhood, ended up blocking me shortly after the 6th, and I lost contact with the QAnon woman. She was the only person I know of personally who attended the coup attempt. I have no idea how that turned out for her or what became of her. So yeah, she was a Trumper and deep into some QAnon stuff. The storm is coming. That's the type of language her and other Q folks were using in regard to that day, leading up to it. They believed January 6th was the day that the deep state was going down. All the pedo deep state Democrats would be arrested and Trump would be installed permanently in power. Wild, crazy stuff. Of course, they had been told to stand back and stand by, and that it would be wild. They took those directions as marching orders. I'll put all that into more complete context as we go along. So yeah, I saw that day coming. She told me all about it. I knew there were so many out there like her, lost in the sauce, basically programmed. They were fueled by lies and conspiracy theories. They were ready and stoked about the big day, January 6, 2021. What would become one of the darkest days in American history. Maybe not by the standard of loss of life like, say, Pearl Harbor or 9/11 or the assassination of presidents, but as far as an attack on this country, it was more dangerous than the others. It was the first American coup attempt. The first attempt in American history to disrupt the peaceful transition of power this country has always maintained, and the first ever attempt to overthrow an election in our democracy from within. Such a dark day. So I saw it coming. I knew what Trump supporters were saying online about it, and I knew that they'd been given orders. Stand back and stand by. We'll be wild. They were given the time and the place. As it unfolded, I was watching live, and even though I wasn't totally surprised, it was still amazing that it was actually and literally unfolding. It was unbelievable. A mob of people waving all kinds of flags and, getting wild. It was wild. It was very, very wild. People who had been lied to were following through with the orders they had been given, storming the Capitol. They erected gallows, chanting to hang the VP, first in line to the presidency, and chanting fight for Trump. They searched the halls for Nancy Pelosi, the Speaker of the House, and second in line to the presidency. Wild it was. Could you imagine what would have happened if they'd actually found Pence or Pelosi? Luckily, they did not. They were told to fight like hell, and they did. Folks fueled by lies about a stolen election and crazy conspiracy theories about deep state pedophiles. The storm had come. Orders had been given. The mob followed the orders. So let's talk about those orders. After I take a sip of wine, I need to try this wine. That is fantastic. That's really delicious. Yeah, so let's talk about those orders. The coup attempt wasn't the most organized. It was directed and driven by rhetoric. Rhetoric that began months before that day. The first direction was given in the presidential debate between Biden and Trump. Chris Wallace, the debate moderator, asked Trump, "Are you willing tonight to condemn white supremacists and militia groups and to say that they need to stand down? Stand down." Trump's answer was, "Proud Boys, stand back and stand by." That's not stand down. That's something different. That was the first order, and of course the Proud Boys took it and heard it as a direct order. Stand back and stand by. Wait for further directions and orders. And man, like, Trump completely knew what he was doing there. He knew stand back and stand by was not stand down. Let's be real. He knew they would take it as they did, as an order, as direction. I'm going to link a Politifact article about this in the show notes. The group loved the phrase, repeated the phrase, but they weren't the only ones. The night of the debate, I saw several everyday average Trump supporters who weren't associated with the Proud Boys sharing the phrase, stand back and stand by. It was an order to far more than the Proud Boys specifically. It was an order to all Trump supporters. So the Proud Boys and others took that order, followed it, then followed the next orders to show up at the Capitol on January 6th and get wild. That day they were told to fight like hell, and they did. They followed that order. Trump's lackey, Rudolph Giuliani, from the same stage Trump used that day, called for trial by combat. I'm going to repeat that. Trial by combat. Maybe the most direct and dangerous order given. But of course, Giuliani said it, not Trump, because that gives Trump some deniability. All the orders give him some level of deniability. They were direct enough to get the point across, but could always be downplayed as not being literal. But he knew who he was talking to. He knew who the people were that he was directing. It was clear enough. Now, when his boy Giuliani called for a trial by combat, that's when I thought things were going to get really messy. Trial by combat. How much more direct could one be with an angry mob? Many militia types and many with military training who thought their country was being stolen and had been told to fight like hell to save it. Yep. Was watching live and was ready and expecting a lot more bloodshed. Thank God it didn't happen. Thank God the coup attempt failed. Hitler's first coup attempt failed as well. We absolutely cannot give Trump another crack at it. No, I have no way of proving this, and it's admittedly speculation, but I truly believe Trump expected his people to be more armed. It's actually quite surprising that they weren't, knowing the demographic of folks involved and how rabid they were. I believe Trump and his circle expected them to be more armed. I mean, that's why he panders to gun nuts. Do you really think someone like Trump, a silver spoon in mouth tower dweller, cares one bit about guns or the Second Amendment or any of your rights for that matter? Get real. Let's get real. Let's be real. But he did want and expect his people to be armed, heavily armed. Thank God they let him down. He, of course, couldn't be direct about that. He couldn't openly call for his people to come armed. Deniability. But I can all but guarantee he expected it. It doesn't take too much imagination there. Hearing what I was hearing leading up to that day, knowing the people who were told to stand back and stand by, get wild, fight like hell, and have trial by combat, I surely was expecting and prepared to witness more violence than what happened, even though it was violent. Of course, people searching the halls for the deep state Democrats had some weapons and things like zip ties, etc. They luckily never found the folks they planned to use them on. Man, I really need a sip of wine. This is really delicious. It might be the most delicious wine I've used for this podcast so far. They've all been really good, but this one's like phenomenal. So yeah. Thank God for delicious wine. And so yeah, January 6th, the first ever coup attempt in the history of the United States. How do we explain this to people that try to downplay it as simply a protest, or as some love to call it online in the mainstream right-wing media, a guided tour? I mean, come on. Do guided tours have gallows usually erected? Are people usually chanting and searching to harm vice presidents and speakers of the House? We've seen tons of video. We watched it live. We heard the orders. We've seen all the video, but still some are in denial. This is how I've tried to break it down and explain it to folks in denial. So I used to be involved in music and promotions and still do some social media management. I used to have a radio show and podcast where we featured local bands, local music, and comedy. We put on events regularly. We did something we call in that business calls to action. We do what Trump did, only for much different reasons and purposes. We'd book a show, we'd tell people when and where to show up, we'd, tell them it will be wild, but in a good fun way, and we'd encourage them to show up, enjoy some local music and dance and stuff. Calls to action, direction. That's what Trump did, but for much different reasons. He called people to action, called them to attempt a coup. We can also look at this in a military sense. In the military, in the military, these directions are called orders. And he was speaking to many people who were militia types, had military training, or folks that have some military fantasy type thoughts going on. Patriot cosplay type folks. So orders, calls to action, direction. That's what happened. These people were given orders and they attempted to follow those orders. Follow? Are you following this? This is how we have to explain it to people who tried to downplay it or are in denial. Hammer it home. Hammer it and hammer it. We've got to get this through to people. We've got to get people to see it for what it was. A coup attempt. A failed coup attempt, but a coup attempt nonetheless. There is no other way to see it. Don't let people say otherwise, and don't let them get away with it. This is something we can't just overlook or let slide. I mean, we've had something like 232 years of peaceful transitions of power. 44 presidents who gave up power after they lost an election or reached their term limits. Trump, for the first time in our history, attempted to use his supporters to attempt a coup that would keep him in power. How can anyone downplay this fact? It's mind-numbing. I need a sip of wine. 2 sips. We watched it live. There are tons and tons of video. We heard the rhetoric, directions, calls to action, and orders that were given. The denial is unreal, and we've got to push back hard against it. We've got to make people understand all this and the gravity of it. We have to call a spade, and we have to call a coup attempt a coup attempt. So yeah, orders given, orders heard, and orders attempted to be carried out. The storm. Gallows erected. Mobs searching for the deep state pedos. Folks in Camp Auschwitz shirts and stuff. It's just so unbelievable that so many still deny the reality of what happened. We've all got to come to terms with it, and we can't not let we've all got to come to terms with it, and we cannot let it happen again. What else is there to say, really? We have to talk to people about this, and we've got to keep talking about it. Hold people accountable. Don't allow folks to downplay it. Press the issue. Share the footage. Talk through the rhetoric, calls to action, and orders, that undoubtedly led to the event, challenge the crazy conspiracy theories that attempt to twist what really happened, share the congressional hearings, and most importantly, vote and inspire others to vote against Trump and MAGA so they don't get another crack at overthrowing our democracy. Fight like hell. Verbally, that is, just to be clear. That's a call to action. So let's leave it there and move on to this wine I'm enjoying and why I chose to pair it with this topic. So I paired this episode with the Federalist Zinfandel 2019. The bottle features George Washington, and on the back of the bottle it reads, quote, First President of the United States, General of the Continental Army, Father of our country. It's no overstatement to say that he is the perfect founding father to represent the Federalist Zinfandel. Sourced from the moderate Mediterranean climate of Lodi, Appalachian, with big, bold flavors of blackberry, plum, it's a true homage to the man himself. This wine is bold, smooth, dry, but soft. It's delicious. That last part was me. The quote ended after himself. So, George Washington, the first president of the United States of America. He could have been king. He decided instead to be called president and served 2 terms as such before stepping down. The election to precede him set a foundational precedent. Since then, we have always had a peaceful transition of power as far as the chief executive and commander-in-chief. It's been that way through the history of this country until January 6, 2021. The first attempt where power was attempted to be held onto not by election but by force. The election to follow Washington was a tight and contentious one. John Adams ran and won against Thomas Jefferson. It was close and the country was divided. Yet Adams peacefully took over the position from George Washington and Thomas Jefferson became the VP. The second place candidate took that role at that time. I will post a link about the first peaceful transition of power in the show notes. Precedents were set until our 45th president, until Donald J. Trump. Trump called his people to the U.S. Capitol and stoked them into storming it, searching for folks that were next in line to the presidency, like the VP Mike Pence and the Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi. Could you imagine if they had been found? What would have happened? There were gallows erected out front. Would they have been dragged out and hung? We can only speculate. Watching live, Hitler's beer hall putsch kept coming to mind. If you don't know what that is, look it up. Hitler's beer hall putsch. I don't know if my German is good there. But that kept coming to mind. It's known that Trump wanted to go to the Capitol, but luckily his handlers did not let that happen. He wanted to ride to the Capitol like Mussolini riding into Rome when he took power. He knew the mayhem that was taking place, and he wanted to be a part of it. It was his coup attempt, and he wanted to be there for it. He expected his people to be more armed, and he thought he was going to hold on to power, and they were going to do it for him. We have got to understand it that way. We've got to understand that day and the gravity of it. We have got to get people who don't understand it to understand it, and we have to push back against folks defending, denying, downplaying, and we can't stand for it. We have to heal as a country. Trump's rhetoric has only become more and more toxic, and we cannot heal until he's completely removed from our Trump's rhetoric has only become more and more toxic, and we cannot heal until he is completely removed from our politics, and hopefully he is serving time for his crimes. That's when healing can begin. Healing from all the damage he has done to this country and the division he has caused. We need peace, and we need to continue peaceful transitions of power going forward. So that's that. It's pretty simple to understand when we lay it out in a simple way. Orders were given. His followers attempted to carry out those orders. It's really that simple. Please share this. Use this to explain January 6th to those who may not understand, those who are in denial, or those who attempt to downplay and whitewash that day. Sip of wine. So that is where we will end this episode. Please subscribe to the Delicious Media YouTube channel. And if you find this content has value to you, I'll have some ways to support in the show notes. Until next time, peace, love, salute, and delicious wine. Peace.